In 1527, a king's desperate desire for a male heir would shatter a thousand-year religious order and create a new church that would shape the English-speaking world forever. This is the story of how personal obsession became political revolution, and how the Church of England was born in defiance, blood, and compromise. The story begins not with Henry VIII, but centuries earlier. In fact, Pope Gregory the Great sent a monk named Augustine to convert the pagan Anglo-Saxons who had conquered Britain after Rome abandoned it. Augustine landed in Kent and became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. Within 90 years, all the Saxon kingdoms had accepted Christianity. The Church of England considers 597 the start of its formal history. For the next 1,000 years, the English Church remained loyal to Rome, its bishops accepting papal authority, its people living and dying within the Catholic faith. By the late Middle Ages, Catholicism was woven into every aspect of English life. 9,000 parishes covered the entire country. The Church taught that salvation came through good works, through the 7 sacraments, through masses for the dead, and prayers for souls in purgatory. One adult man in 50 was in religious orders, monks, canons, friars, nuns. Nearly 900 religious houses dotted the landscape. The Pope in Rome held ultimate authority over every English soul. Then came Henry VIII. In 1527, Henry was desperate. His wife Catherine of Aragon had given him a daughter, but no son. Without a male heir, the Tudor dynasty faced extinction. Henry asked Pope Clement VII to annul his marriage. The Pope refused. Henry didn't accept that answer. If Rome wouldn't give him what he needed, he would take it. In 1533, Parliament passed the Act in Restraint of Appeals, barring legal cases from being appealed outside England. The Archbishop of Canterbury could now annul Henry's marriage without reference to Rome. Then, in November 1534, came the hammer blow. The Act of Supremacy formally abolished papal authority and declared Henry supreme head of the Church of England. 1,000 years of allegiance to Rome ended with the stroke of a pen. But Henry's religious beliefs remained essentially Catholic. He allied himself with Protestants only because he needed their support to break with Rome. The real theological revolution came after his death. Between 1536 and 1540, Henry unleashed one of the most revolutionary events in English history, the dissolution of the monasteries. Nearly 900 religious houses were disbanded. 12,000 monks, canons, friars, and nuns and entire way of life were turned out. Their lands, their wealth, their libraries, their treasures, everything was appropriated by the crown and sold to fund wars. Ancient monasteries that had stood for centuries were torn down. An entire social structure vanished. When Henry's 9-year-old son, Edward VI, became king in 1547, the real Protestant Reformation began. Edward's advisors were true believers. Justification by faith alone became central doctrine. Government-sanctioned iconoclasm swept the country. Church walls were whitewashed and covered with biblical texts condemning idolatry. Everything Catholics had revered as holy was condemned as superstition or worse, idolatry. The reformer, Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury, created the Book of Common Prayer in 1549, replacing the Latin Mass with English liturgy. It was revolutionary. For the first time, ordinary people could understand what was being said in church. A revised version in 1552 went further, embracing Reformed theology that rejected Catholic doctrines of transubstantiation and the sacrifice of the Mass. Then Edward died in 1553, and his half-sister Mary became queen. Mary was Catherine of Aragon's daughter, raised Catholic, and she was determined to reverse the Reformation. England was briefly reunited with Rome. Protestant leaders were burned at the stake. Thomas Cranmer himself was executed. For 5 years, England returned to Catholicism, but Mary died childless in 1558, and the throne passed to her half-sister Elizabeth. Elizabeth I's religious settlement would define the Church of England for centuries. The Elizabethan settlement, implemented between 1559 and 1563, charted a middle course. The Act of Supremacy made the monarch supreme governor of the Church. The Act of Uniformity restored a slightly modified Book of Common Prayer. The 39 Articles became the doctrinal statement. England was Protestant again, but with ambiguity built in enough to allow different interpretations, enough to keep the peace. The Church described itself as a via media, a middle way between Lutheran and Reformed Protestantism, and later as both Catholic and Reformed. It retained bishops and apostolic succession like Rome, but embraced Protestant theology. This deliberate ambiguity became its defining characteristic, a breadth that allowed High Church Anglo-Catholics and Low Church Evangelicals to coexist under one roof. But peace was fragile. Struggle for control of the Church persisted through the reigns of James I and Charles I. Puritans wanted further reform. Traditionalists resisted. When the English Civil War erupted in 1642, the Church of England sided with the losing Royalists. After the king's defeat, episcopacy was formally abolished. The Book of Common Prayer was outlawed and replaced by the Directory of Public Worship. Presbyterian structures replaced bishops for 11 years during the Commonwealth. The Church of England effectively ceased to exist. Then came the Restoration, in 1660. The monarchy returned, and so did the Church of England, restored to something close to its Elizabethan form. But the Tudor ideal of encompassing all English people in one religious organization was abandoned forever. 2,000 parish ministers who hadn't been ordained by bishops were ousted. Catholics were grudgingly tolerated but restricted. Nonconformists existed outside the established church. The religious landscape of England had fractured permanently. As the British Empire expanded, so did the Church of England. The Diocese of Nova Scotia was created in 1787, the first Anglican diocese outside England and Wales. Churches were established in India, Hong Kong, Nigeria, and across the colonies. What began as the English Church became the mother church of a global Anglican communion. Through it all, the British monarch remained supreme governor. Measures passed by the Church's General Synod still require approval by Parliament. 26 bishops sit in the House of Lords. The Archbishop of Canterbury remains both spiritual leader of Anglicans worldwide and servant of the English state. Today, the Church of England claims approximately 23 million baptized members. Though active attendance has declined dramatically, the Church ordains women as bishops, blesses same-sex couples, and debates issues that would have been unimaginable to Henry VIII or Thomas Cranmer. But it remains the established Church of England, legally bound to the crown, heir to a history that began with a king's obsession and created something far greater and stranger than anyone intended. The Church of England, born from royal defiance, forged through religious warfare, and shaped by centuries of compromise. Neither fully Catholic nor fully Protestant, but something uniquely English. Subscribe to the daily feature for more stories from history.